Hi, everybody. Today we are going to talk a little bit about, we're going to continue our discussion on water potential by looking at some examples of how plants will get resources and how those resources will be transported through plants. Um, so we're going to start a little bit with plant evolution. So how exactly did plants evolve? Well, plants are multicellular and they are eukaryotic, and they're also photosynthetic autotrophs. So, in order for plant evolution to happen, we need to have evolved all these things. Eukaryotic cells had to have already evolved, right? So, remember the endosymbiotic theory, that already had to happen. So, we already had to have chloroplasts, we had to have multicellular. So, that means we had to have cells that have different functions grouped together, doing different things in a plant. And the ability to be autotrophs also had to evolve. So here we have some examples of different plants. So basically, plants started off in the water. And in the water, they got their oxygen. They lived close to the water line so they could get sunlight. So the sun wasn't too far. It was able to get through the water. And also, in order to move from water to land, plants needed certain adaptations, right? Moving onto land would mean that the plants dried out. So that has to be something that's overcome by plants before they can move on to land. So one thing that has to happen is that zygotes that don't dry out when on land have to evolve. So sporopollenin, this is like a polymer that a plant produces to protect its spores and to protect its spore layers, its gametes. So this has to evolve first, and this is going to help prevent the spores from drying out, so that even though they're not existing in water, they still have water, and that water doesn't evaporate out too quickly. It allows those spores to last for a long time. Also, vascular tissue has to evolve, like xylem and phloem. So xylem is the important one here. Xylem is like a long, almost like a straw that goes all the way up a plant, and it allows water to move up. Think back to what you already know about water and capillary action, those capillary tubes we used in lab. The xylem are like a capillary tube. The water sticks to the side of the xylem and it pulls more water up with it. So this vascular tissue allowed plants to become taller to compete for sunlight. And here we have xylem is the tubes for water, and then there's also phloem, which is for sugar. The sugar that is produced is going to go down. Okay, what other adaptations do we need to help plants exist on land? Well, we need roots. So roots are going to gather minerals and water from the land, and they're also going to anchor plants to the ground to keep them from moving or getting upturned. So roots can either be very deep, like here we have a plant that has a taproot, one very big root that goes down and only a few little side branches coming out of it. And here we have a fibrous root. This root has a lot more surface area, so it's probably better at getting water. We also had leaves evolve. Leaves are flat and broad that help to get photosynthesis, so they help to get sunlight. And then pollen and seeds are going to aid reproduction on land. Seeds are good at traveling through the air or sometimes on land to help new plants arise, so to help make new plant offspring. Okay, so our first question, what are some adaptations that has allowed plants to evolve on land? And we're typically talking about aiding in water uptake or conservation. So take a moment and answer this question. All right, now that you've answered this question, you probably came up with something like fibrous roots, or you may have come up with the sporopollenin layer, or you may have come up with a waxy coating on the leaves. So all those things are going to help plants conserve water or get more water. Here we kind of have a brief showing of how plants evolved. Plants evolved in the water, and over time, probably plants evolved that could spend time on land very close to water, so water was constantly washing up on these photosynthetic organisms. And we also had plants existing in fresh water, or plants existing near around the edges of fresh water, so there was always a water supply. And then as time went on, certain adaptations allowed plants to survive longer and longer periods without water. So remember, that's that coating, that waxy coating, the sporopollenin, the xylem. Those things allowed plants to become taller, and they also allow plants to withstand drought. So even in long periods without water, plants could still survive. So over time, plants became less dependent on being in or around water, and they could move farther away from sources of water. Of course, plants still need water, but they have adaptations to help them survive harsh conditions. Okay, another thing that plants evolved are symbiotic relationships. This is a relationship with another organism. Many minerals are too scarce in soil to support plant growth. So basically, many minerals, there's not enough of them in soil, and so plants are going to need the help of other organisms. Most plants have evolved relationships with other organisms that help them, such as getting nitrates. Nitrates are pretty scarce in the soil, so other nutrients may help with that, as well as phosphates and certain minerals. The examples include a root fungus relationship called mycorrhizae. This is a fungus that's going to live with a plant. And then also root bacteria relationships. These are bacteria that live in plant roots that form what we call nodules. These all help with plants getting minerals and therefore getting water. So mycorrhizae is a mutualistic relationship. What is a mutualistic relationship? That's a win-win relationship. So both organisms win. The plant wins and the fungus wins. They both benefit. So basically, mycorrhizae is fungal strands that have intertwined themselves in the roots, and they extend out into the soil. We can see in the picture over here, the plant on the left, this is a corn plant, has mycorrhizae, these big fibrous things, which increase the surface area. The plant on the right does not, and we can see the surface area is much smaller. Basically, the mycorrhizae helps the plant extract minerals, and if the plant can extract more minerals, then it can move more water in through osmosis. So it's really important that plants have mycorrhizae. It would be very hard to grow crops without it. These fungi are really important in the evolution of plants, and they also help us if we are growing crops. So this is a mutualistic relationship because the plant gets more minerals and therefore more water, but also the plant, remember, is making sugar, and the fungus can take some of that sugar and use it. So the fungus is getting some nutrients from the plant. The plant is getting minerals and water. The fungus is getting some sugar, so it's getting some energy. So they both win from this relationship. It's mutually beneficial. Here is showing these mycorrhizae filaments extending into the cells of the root down here. All right, so mycorrhizae is a critical step in the successful colonization of land. In order for plants to move onto land, they had to use these fungi. The fungi helped develop the soil and helped the plants get more minerals. All right, and here we see another simplified version of the colonization of land plants. At first, algae was in the water. It evolved and moved onto the land close to the water, so it was hard to dry out because the water was constantly washing up over it. And then over time, plants got taller to compete for light, and because they got taller, they had to have xylem and other adaptations to help them move water up there quickly. All right, what else do plants need? Plants also need some nitrogen. So there is lots of nitrogen in the atmosphere. Nitrogen gas makes up 79% of the atmosphere. However, plants can only take up nitrogen through their roots. They can't take nitrogen through the atmosphere. The roots are in the ground. So basically, in order for plants to take up nitrogen, they have to take it up in the form of ammonium ions or nitrate ions, both of which are minerals in the soil. Plants cannot turn gaseous nitrogen into mineral nitrogen very easily. So what are plants going to do? Well, in order for the nitrogen in the air to get into the soil, we need bacteria. There are certain bacteria that can I should be over here, that are fixing nitrogen, which means taking gaseous nitrogen and putting it into solid form in the soil. And therefore, plants can then take up that nitrogen. So plants need nitrogen in the soil. And bacteria are going to help with that. So plants can attract nitrogen-fixing bacteria to their roots by secreting chemicals into the soil. Certain plants, called legumes, can attract nitrogen-fixing bacteria to their roots. The bacteria actually bore their way into the plant cells using some digestive enzymes. You can see that happening here. There's little root hairs. The bacteria move in. They sort of infect the root. But instead of causing an infection, this causes a nodule, and the nodule is going to help fix nitrogen into that nitrate or ammonium form, and it allows the plant to then use the nitrogen. So it's good for the plant. The plant is going to benefit because it gets nitrogen in a form that it can use. The bacteria are going to benefit because the plant produces sugar, and the bacteria can then take that sugar. So it is another mutualistic relationship. So bacteria uses the plant's energy, and the bacteria provide the plant with nitrogen. All right, here's another question. Describe mutualism using one of the two examples we discussed in this section. And now that you've described mutualism, you may have discussed the mycorrhizae being a mutualistic way for plants to get minerals and water, or you may have discussed the nodules being used to help the plants get nitrates or nitrogen. Okay, this last part is going to be real short. How does water and other minerals, how is it able to transport itself through the plants? Well, they can move from one cell to the next, making use of the plasmodesmata, which are basically little tunnels in between plant cells. So some minerals and other chemicals can actually just go right through the cytoplasm from one cell into the next. For many plant cells, the cytoplasm is connected via the plasmodesmata. So the cytoplasm easily flows from one cell to the next. So there we see another picture of this. There are these cell junctions that allow cytoplasm to flow through. It allows for fast communication and for sharing of resources. All right. In an animal cell, these would be gap junctions, but in a plant cell, we call them plasmodesmata, direct contact between cells. So that is plasmodesmata. In fact, they may even connect organelles. Here we have the ER being connected via this tubule. So there is a lot of ways that a plant will undergo transport. These are just a few that we're going to talk about. If you have any questions, let me know.